NRL star Curtis Scott found guilty of domestic violence charges.
NRL player Curtis Scott has been found guilty of assaulting and threatening his former partner Talia Clark. NRL star Curtis Scott has been found guilty of assaulting and threatening former partner Talia Clark during their roughly 2-year relationship. On Friday, Magistrate Daniel Covington ruled Scott had pushed Ms. Clark during an altercation at her parents' home in Sylvania, causing injuries to her head, forearm and wrist. He also found that during a holiday at Lake Conjola on the NSW South Coast, Scott charged into Ms. Clark, knocking her to the ground. Scott was also found to have verbally threatened Ms. Clark during a phone conversation in which he threatened to kill both her and himself, and after which he deliberately drove his car into a tree. Over those incidents he was found guilty of assault occasioning actual bodily harm, common assault, and stalk or intimidate with the intention of causing fear or physical harm. Scott was cleared in regards to several other allegations, including that he choked Ms. Clark during an argument on the night of the 2018 NRL Grand Final. He initially pleaded not guilty to 4 counts of common assault, stalk or intimidate with the intention of causing fear or physical harm, intentionally choke a person without consent, 2 counts of assault occasioning actual bodily harm, and intentionally choke a person with recklessness. During a series of hearings at Cindy Downing Center Local Court, the court heard from witnesses close to both parties, including Scott's former roommate and Melbourne Storm star Brandon Smith. Scott admitted he and Ms. Clark struggled with issues of trust and jealousy in their roughly 2-year relationship between 2017 and 2019 that resulted in heated arguments. However, he denied the arguments ever became physical or that he threatened Ms. Clark with violence. Ms. Clark shed tears as evidence of the assaults and guilty verdicts were read to the court, supported by family members. Mr. Scott sat silently next to his older brother, who gave evidence in his favor during the trial. When asked in evidence why she waited close to 2 years to officially come forward with the allegations, Ms. Clark said she had hesitations over how she would be portrayed by the media. Ms. Clark said she had concerns over how women making allegations against NRL players had been treated in the past and about how she would be scrutinized as a woman. Magistrate Codington described evidence given by Ms. Clark's family members as persuasive and hers as compelling. On the night of the assault in Sydney's Sylvania, Ms. Clark claimed she was in bed when Mr. Scott came back to her house smelling of alcohol. While there were no direct witnesses to the assault, Ms. Clark's parents testified they had been woken by noise and yelling and came downstairs to find their daughter cowering against a wall with Mr. Scott above her. Magistrate Codington accepted Ms. Clark's evidence that Mr. Scott had forcefully pressed his head into hers, pushed her and launched her over a couch, leaving her with a lump on her head and grazes to her forearm and wrist. The offense of common assault occurred on Boxing Day of 2019 when the pair traveled to Lake Conjola to stay at a holiday home belonging to Ms. Clark's uncle. It followed an argument between the pair over a message Ms. Clark received on Christmas Day from an unknown man, which Mr. Scott allegedly took issue with. While at the holiday home, the court was told the couple argued and Mr. Scott had walked outside, followed by Ms. Clark and her sister, Tommy Shaw, who testified to having an obscured view of the incident from behind a car. "I was looking just to make sure nothing had happened. I could see Curtis' body language get aggressive," Tommy Shaw Clark told the court. "I just saw him really quickly move forward and her body disappeared." Ms. Clark said she tried to calm down Mr. Scott, who then used his body to knock her to the ground. "He kind of charged at me. I don't know what connected with my jaw. Could have been his shoulder, could have been his head," Ms. Clark said during her evidence. After the incident, Mr. Scott allegedly told Ms. Clark he was really sorry. Magistrate Codington said he was satisfied the accused charged the complainant knocking her to the ground. However, he said evidence of injuries sustained in the incident, including ripped nails, a skinned knee and bruises on Clark's arm, had not been sufficiently proven, resulting in a lesser guilty finding of common assault. In what Magistrate Codington referred to as the break-up incident, Mr. Scott threatened Clark over the phone while he was driving after having ended their relationship days before. Clark's parents were also listening to the call and testified having heard Mr. Scott call their daughter a SLT and a whore. During her evidence, Clark testified to having heard Mr. Scott say, "FKU, I'm going to f***ing kill you. This is your fault." She said Mr. Scott had screamed at her in the most horrific voice, "I'm going to f***ing kill you, CT." During his evidence, Mr. Scott called the moment the lowest in his life, but claimed not to have threatened Clark's life, but only his own, before deliberately driving his car into a tree. Magistrate Codington said the evidence did not sufficiently support other allegations, including that Mr. Scott had been verbally abusive every night that she stayed with him at a home in Melbourne he shared with several teammates. He said it also did not support beyond reasonable doubt that Mr. Scott had choked her on the night of the 2018 NRL Grand Final in an incident which only the couple was present for. A sentence date has been set for November 18.
Curtis Scott, born the 12th of October 1997, is an Australian professional rugby league footballer who last played as a centre for the Canberra Raiders in the NRL. He previously played for the Melbourne Storm and Canberra Raiders in the National Rugby League and has played at representative level for the Prime Minister's 13